Hello, and welcome to another edition of On the Point, so generously produced by the American Acupuncture Council. And today we have a surprise guest, Lonny Jarrett. And I'm sure many of you know of his books and have taken his courses. But just so you know, Lonny has been practicing Chinese medicine in the Berkshires and Stockbridge, Massachusetts since 1986. And he's a founding member of the Acupuncture Society of Massachusetts, a fellow of the National Academy of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. He's author of 2 books, Nourishing Destiny, The Inner Tradition of Chinese Medicine, and The Clinical Practice of Chinese Medicine. He's got a master's degree in neurobiology, as well as being a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. He was recently featured in the text Great Work of Your Life, a guide for the journey for your true calling, to your true calling, by the best-selling author Stephen Cope. Lonny hosts a website called nourishingdestiny.com, which has an online community for 3,000 practitioners of Chinese medicine worldwide. And I must say he's got quite the Facebook group going. So maybe you can mention that, Lonny. And for his teaching schedule, because he teaches all the time, you can see Chinese medicine courses and get his books from spiritpathpress.com. So today, Lonny is going to talk about the inner workings of acupuncture points. So Lonny, I will let you work your magic.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation, and to the American Acupuncture Council, and to you, Virginia, for having me. And Virginia gave me about 1 hour notice because someone canceled and said, can you do a talk? And I had a 2-hour patient for an intake cancel 15 minutes before that. So I said, sure. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. Last weekend, I was in Denver to the Acupuncture Association of Colorado. I gave a lecture on the inner nature of acupuncture points to 160 people for 2 days. And we're going to take a hop, skip, and a jump very quickly through some of those themes. So what's interesting to me is when I teach this class, it's always populated by acupuncturists. And at the outset of the conference, I said, okay, I'd like to start the whole lecture by asking you a question. What is an acupuncture point? And nobody raised their hand. And that's always been my experience. So it's interesting to me that people go through 2, 3, 4 years of school. They take a certification exam. They practice 1, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And you say, what is an acupuncture point? And nobody has anything to say. So the most frequent way that acupuncture points are chosen, and my PowerPoint should be up on screen here so people can look at this slide. So the most frequent way that acupuncture points are spoken about, rather, is as switches that make things happen. And this is reinforced in the books, and it's reinforced by the test. So if you want to treat these symptoms, what are the points you do? If you want to treat such and such confirmation, such and such a diagnosis, what points do you do? And people are taught to think of points like, you know, spleen 9 drains damp, and liver 3 regulates qi. And for this set of symptoms and this set of signs, do this combination of points. And they're basically taught in a reductionistic, mechanistic way that's based on materialism, as if they were just throwing switches to make things happen. Now, anybody who's owned a car knows that the car doesn't start every time you turn the key. And human beings are less predictable and far more complex than automobiles. And so I wouldn't wholly discount the notion of thinking of points as switches that make things happen. But I'd say it's the least interesting and least significant part of what Chinese medicine is and how acupuncture works. So looking at some other ways of thinking about points, we can say that acupuncture points are an interface between the macrocosm and the microcosm.
Right.
And what is that interface? Well, the interface between inside and outside in a human being is the skin. And the skin is governed by metal element, which is lungs and colon.
Mm-hmm.
And the lungs govern the Wei Qi.
Yes.
And the Wei Qi is the basis of our immunity. And the whole question of immunity is the question of discerning the difference between self and other in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I think of it also like a energetic buffer, that
yes,
it's not just protecting you from external pernicious influences in terms of disease and microorganisms, but it's a auric protection in a way. And without that strong Wei Qi, people are more inclined to take things in and absorb things they shouldn't be. Yeah.
Well, sure. And the point I'm making is the Wei Qi works by establishing the boundary between interior and exterior, and between self and other. Yeah. And the needle is penetrating that barrier. It's going to create a context of a communication between inside and outside. And the metal element governs the Wei Qi to establish that barrier through our immunity, which is why, we often get sick first, and the Taiyang is the outermost level. Right? And when Wei Qi dysfunctions, we can think of the dysfunctional drawing of boundary between self and other in a way that creates the illusion of separation. Mm-hmm. And that illusion of separation is ego. And it's based on pride and self-image. Mm-hmm. Self-image being the image we have of ourselves, which is how we imagine everybody else thinks of us. Mm. And needles have the capacity to bridge that dysfunction, to temporarily eliminate the imagined boundary, the apparent boundary between interior and exterior. So we know when we go back in the room after putting needles in, a patient doesn't know where they are, they don't know how long they've been there, they don't know if the needles are in or out, they're often startled. They look at me like, what are you doing in my bedroom? Where am I? How did I get here? They've had an experience beyond time and space. Right. And the ego arises with time and space. The boundary between self and the universe arises in the duality of time and space. Where are you in your deepest dreamless sleep? Well, in your deepest dreamless sleep, there's no boundary. Mm-hmm. So when we say that points activate the interface between the macrocosm and the microcosm, it's potentially a very deep and profound discussion.
Oh, I know that you're just giving us a taste of this, that you could speak for hours on these things.
I could speak for 5 days without repeating myself.
Right. and that's why your books are so extensive.
In this particular presentation. Yeah. So points give access to archetypes. Mm-hmm. Archetypes, they're portals that evoke archetypes, like Hill for gallbladder 40, or Geyser or Whirlpool for liver 3, which are 2 points we'll look at quickly. Archetypes are universal structures in consciousness devoid of content, but they're strange attractors to specific qualities and types of content.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I'll tell you in a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
So the needles have the capacity to tonify or sedate, to fill deficiencies, and to drain repletions, to promote flow. And when we say promote flow, that's a metaphor for unrepressed content that a person has buried in the unconscious, content that they have not been willing to face. So when we promote flow, when qi flows, when yang rises, yang that has been repressed beneath the diaphragm, when it rises above the diaphragm, it brings repressed content into consciousness. When we treat congealed blood represents painful content we haven't been willing to look at. It unrepresses and it lets repressed content back into consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Acupuncture points can catalyze the return and the emergence of higher potentials. So they can catalyze the return to capacities within ourselves we buried. Aspects of the past we will not face always represent dimensions of the future that are denied. And we can think of acupuncture points in a way, as I said, as an antenna that goes from the outside, from the macrocosm, through the surface, through the boundary we've established, into the microcosm to join them. So when we needle an acupuncture point, we like to attain qi. So we talk about da qi, attaining qi. And this is the feeling of harmonizing excess and deficiency. And the character I have on the right here, where my cursor is right now, we see this character for Chang, which is the same Chang as in Chiang Mai.
Uh-huh.
And the character Chang has 3 drops of water with an arrow in the center of a target, which means center, which means middle. And this character has 2 meanings, one of which is whirlpool, which represents the return to origin. A whirlpool goes down into an abyss. You get sucked down into the depth. And the other meaning is geyser, which is an explosion out of emptiness into becoming. So this one character, Chang, relates to the unity between being and emptiness and becoming. And then we have the character Qi. So Chang Qi is the whirling vertex between heaven and earth that both keeps those dual poles of reality apart, but merges them together as one. Mm-hmm. One of the functions of Qi is to hold things in place. So the Chang Qi holds heaven and earth apart from each other as dual poles of the cosmos, but brings them together. And we have that sensation when we attain Qi with a needle of that pulling, which is the activation of both the sucking down into the whirlpool and the flow of Qi like the geyser erupting. Acupuncture points have an intelligence built into them. If your pulse is going 120 beats a minute, heart 7 can pull it back down towards 70. And if your heart rate is 38 beats a minute, heart 7 can pull it up towards 70. Mm-hmm. So there's an innate wisdom inherently built into acupuncture point function. Herbs don't necessarily do this. There's no amount of aconite you can take to make you cold. Ginger won't make you cold, and there's no amount of gypsum you can take to make yourself warm. The only herbs that have this intelligence are the highest herbs, like Wu Weizhi, Shizandra, the highest herbs in the Shengnong Bonsao. So if you're depressed, Wu Weizhi can inspire you by tonifying the lungs to bring you out of the depression. But if you're so inspired you can't sleep at night, Wu Weizhi can help you let go of that inspiration to sleep.
Right.
But only the highest herbs, the true adaptogens, have that capacity.
Yeah. Bringing things to homeostasis.
Yes. Yeah. So acupuncture points are related to channels by function. So if we say there are 14 points on the liver channel, and the liver has the function of decision-making, planning, inner perspective, outer perspective, judgment, and compassion, then we can say that the 14 points on the liver channel each address some aspect of harmonizing judgment, compassion, belligerence, benevolence, regulating the smooth flow of qi through the providing of perspectives. Acupuncture points function evolves and is developmental. As humanity's consciousness evolves, language evolves, the human understanding of what it means to exist and to be a human being evolves. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the functions of the acupuncture points are always evolving. There are functions of acupuncture points in adults that don't exist in infants.
Really? Can you give an example of that?
Well, for sure. We're going to talk about gallbladder 40 in a moment, and how it's located by the lateral malleolus. It's like going up a hill to get perspective, to see where you've been, where you are, where you're going. It can contract perspective and it can expand perspective.
Mm-hmm.
An infant doesn't have a human mind yet. They have no perspective. They don't even have the capacity to generate imagery or hold imagery.
Oh.
You take a rattle for a 6-month-old and put it under a pillow, the rattle doesn't exist anymore. It can't sustain an image outside of the context of the image being there. A 3-week-old can't even see the rattle, can barely focus on the rattle to have the image when it's there. A 6-month-old can see the rattle but can't sustain the image. A 1.5-year-old will just go lift up the pillow and get the rattle. An older person can, a person who's 12 can set a life goal for something they want to create in the world and hold an image. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an acupuncturist. I want to run a 4-minute mile.
Mm.
An awoken 20 or 30-year-old can hold the image of the self they want to become in the future and bring that future self here now through action.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all different levels of visualization that become available developmentally based on our age. And the acupuncture points only have those higher functions in people who've attained those levels of development.
Lonny, I love the way you've really thought about these things deeply. It's so obvious that these are questions and issues and knowledge that you've been exploring and, have an evolving sense of understanding over time. It's really wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And I never stop exploring. And what all we can do is consider these things from as many angles as we can think about them about. And the more philosophies and the more perspectives we can take, the more detail arises.
Right. Yeah. The scholar physician. I have one of your articles about that.
Yes.
What is the name of your group on Facebook again?
Chinese Medicine Scholar Physicians.
Yeah.
We have about 2,700 acupuncturists on there.
Yeah, it's really, it's wonderful because nobody's promoting, things commercially. People are serious students.
I don't even advertise my own work on there. Nobody's allowed to promote. It's strictly for the scholarly discussion of Chinese medicine.
Yeah, it's a really great group.
Thank you. So moving on here quickly. So the function of points, like an archetype, reflect the quality of a practitioner's own consciousness and development back to them. Just as points are developmental and certain aspects of points are only available in a patient who's reached a certain level of development, those aspects of the points are only available to practitioners who can see them and who can value them and who have arrived at that level of development itself. So when we're treating physical problems, I don't have to have been pregnant to treat a woman for fertility. I don't have to have had sciatica to treat a patient for sciatica or have migraine headaches. But when it comes to the subtle dimensions of Chinese medicine, when it comes to the soul and the mind and the spirit and the conscience and the authentic self and the ground, helping awake the ground of being, the dimension of a patient that's never been wounded, victimized, traumatized, and has nothing to overcome, I can only really effectively access that in a patient to the degree that I've accessed that and attained it within my own self. Exactly. Which is why Chinese medicine is a cultivational discipline.
I totally agree. I taught at the Worsley School for many years, workshops, and, of course, the beautiful poetic, understanding of the points and these cosmic names and stuff. But I didn't really see many people who could access that level. I'm trying to think if I saw anyone who could. And, they asked me to write about how could you reconcile as a 5-element practitioner doing something like facial acupuncture in your practice. And I said, it's not the type of acupuncture, it's what you bring to it. It's your intention. It's your chi cultivation and your greater self cultivation.
It's exactly right. I wouldn't totally discount theory and knowledge, but I would say that theory and knowledge can only serve who and what we are.
Yeah.
So So let me wrap up here quickly. The efficacy of acupuncture exists in gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual realms. And our patients, when we treat these points, the points are accessing the physical body, they're accessing the mind, they're accessing the soul, they're accessing dimensions of the patient that have never been wounded because they exist beyond time and space. So I just got the cue that we're out of time.
Oh. Well, we'll have to have you back because I want to hear. I know you were going to talk about.
Well, we got to the first slide out of 6, which isn't too bad in 20 minutes.
Well, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but
let me just.
I think it's a very interesting, topic and discussion for practitioners.
Let me just put up quickly here. This is where everyone can contact me. My courses are at ChineseMedicine.courses. My books are at SpiritPathPress.com. My online community is at NourishingDestiny.com and on Facebook at Chinese Medicine Scholar Physicians. And if you go to NourishingDestiny.com and click on the Articles tab for free, you'll have most of the articles I've written the last 30 years or so.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
thank
Lonny, you. Absolute pleasure. And definitely we'll have you on again to get into more specifics with the points, because obviously we're just scratching the surface.
Anytime, Virginia. I'm always happy to.
Right.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
Oh, thank you for doing it so last minute. Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And be sure and do so again next week for another host on To the Point, produced by the American Acupuncture Council. And if you want any information about my workshops or to hear that, to see that article that I mentioned, you can find it on my website, luminousbeauty.com. Or, you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel, Super Bajrang Bali, and you can find out more about my work and related topics. So thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.